If you're waking up 2, 3, even 4 times a night to urinate, most people assume it's just aging. It's not. In many cases, this is not a bladder problem. It's a metabolic signaling problem, driven by when and how you drink water, your insulin levels, your electrolytes, and how your kidneys are being told to behave. Your body isn't broken. It's responding exactly the way physiology tells it to. Most people believe waking up at night to urinate is just part of getting older, an unavoidable decline, something to tolerate rather than question. But what if that nightly disruption is not a sign of aging at all, and instead, a sign that one of the most powerful hormonal systems in your body is being overridden every single evening? Deep inside the brain, in a region called the hypothalamus, your body releases a hormone known as vasopressin, or antidiuretic hormone. And its job is nothing short of extraordinary, because it tells your kidneys to slow down urine production while you sleep, conserving fluid so your cells can repair, your brain can detoxify, and your nervous system can reset without interruption. Under normal ancestral conditions, this hormone rises predictably at night, allowing humans to sleep for long, uninterrupted stretches even without access to water, a survival mechanism refined over hundreds of thousands of years. But modern metabolic stress is interfering with this ancient signal, and one of the biggest disruptors is chronically elevated insulin driven by late-night eating, processed carbohydrates, and constant grazing, which research shows alters kidney sodium handling and suppresses the very hormone designed to keep you asleep. When insulin stays high, the kidneys are essentially commanded to release both sodium and water, increasing urine volume even when the brain is trying to initiate nighttime conservation, creating a physiological tug-of-war that your bladder ultimately loses. Your kidneys, which filter roughly 180 liters of fluid every single day, are not malfunctioning. They are responding precisely to the chemical environment you create through timing of food, timing of hydration, and metabolic health. Studies in circadian biology demonstrate that the body's fluid regulation follows a strict day-night rhythm, with urine production meant to fall by up to 50% during sleep. Yet millions of people unknowingly flatten that rhythm through late fluid loading, high glycemic dinners, alcohol, and artificial light exposure, all of which signal to the brain that it is still daytime. The result is not just inconvenience, but fragmented sleep architecture, and fragmented sleep is linked to increased inflammation, impaired glucose control, higher blood pressure, and even accelerated cognitive decline, meaning that a simple nighttime bathroom trip is often the visible symptom of a much deeper metabolic miscommunication. This is why physicians focused on root cause health, including Dr. Kenberry, emphasize that nocturnal urination is frequently a signaling issue rather than a structural one, because when insulin falls, when circadian rhythms are respected, and when hydration patterns match human biology, vasopressin can finally do the job it was designed to do. Your body is trying to protect your sleep, trying to balance your fluids, trying to restore you, but it can only follow the instructions it receives, and when those instructions change, the outcome changes, which means the path to sleeping through the night may not lie in treating the bladder at all, but in restoring the hormonal conversation that modern life has quietly disrupted. There is a silent misunderstanding that has crept into modern life, a belief that drinking water at any hour is always healthy, always harmless, always the right thing to do. Yet the human body was never designed for round-the-clock hydration, because every cell in you runs on a circadian rhythm that carefully orchestrates when to absorb fluids and when to shut that system down. For thousands of generations, humans consumed most of their water during daylight activity, while hunting, walking, working, and eating. And as the sun set, fluid intake naturally declined, allowing the brain to initiate a cascade of nighttime signals that prepare the body for restoration. One of those signals is the rise of vasopressin, the hormone that tells your kidneys to concentrate urine and conserve water. But when you drink large amounts late in the evening, you send a completely different message, essentially informing your brain that the active phase of the day is not over yet. Modern research in chronobiology shows that the kidneys themselves contain internal clocks, tiny molecular timekeepers that expect fluid intake earlier in the day and reduced filtration demands at night. And when that expectation is violated, urine production continues at a daytime rate even while you are trying to sleep. This mismatch is not trivial because forcing your body to process fluid at night increases nocturnal urine volume, stretches the bladder during hours meant for healing, and fragments sleep cycles that are essential for memory consolidation consolidation, hormone regulation, and immune repair. Sleep scientists have demonstrated that even a single awakening can interrupt slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage responsible for tissue recovery and metabolic recalibration, meaning that the just one quick trip to the bathroom is physiologically far more disruptive than it feels. Late-night hydration also dilutes plasma sodium levels slightly, triggering compensatory kidney activity to rebalance electrolytes, which further increases urine output in a process your body interprets as a need to restore equilibrium rather than rest. Add to this the artificial lighting that convinces your brain it is still daytime, and you create a perfect storm where the biological night never fully begins, leaving your organs stuck in metabolic limbo. What feels like a healthy habit, sipping water while watching television, refilling a glass before bed, trying to stay hydrated, can unintentionally override millions of years of evolutionary programming. Clinicians who focus on aligning behavior with physiology, including Dr. Ken Berry, often point out that the solution is not to drink less water overall, but to drink it when your body is prepared to use it, because hydration is not just about quantity, it is about timing. When fluid intake is front-loaded into the earlier hours of the day, the kidneys complete their high-volume work before nightfall. Vasopressin rises as intended, and the body transitions into a state of conservation and repair. The tragedy is that many people blame their bladder, their age, or their genetics, never realizing that the real issue may be as simple and as profound as drinking at odds with their internal clock, a small behavioral shift that can restore a natural rhythm the body has been trying unsuccessfully to re-establish every single night. What if the reason you keep waking up at night has less to do with how much you drink and far more to do with what your body is doing with sugar? Because one of the most overlooked drivers of nighttime urination is insulin, the same hormone at the center of metabolic health, fat storage, and inflammation. Every time you eat a refined carbohydrate or a sugar-heavy meal, especially late in the evening, your blood glucose rises and your pancreas releases insulin to push that glucose into cells. But insulin doesn't just manage sugar, it also acts directly on the kidneys, telling them to alter how they handle sodium, and where sodium goes, water must follow. This is not theory, but well-established renal physiology. Elevated insulin increases sodium reabsorption during the day, yet paradoxically contributes to fluid shifts and pressure changes that later force the kidneys to excrete excess water, creating a delayed wave of urine production that often hits in the middle of the night. In individuals with insulin resistance, a condition affecting hundreds of millions of adults worldwide, this signaling becomes chaotic, with persistently high insulin levels disrupting the normal nighttime rise of antidiuretic hormone, the very signal meant to keep you asleep by reducing urine formation. Instead of entering a calm, restorative state, the kidneys continue filtering aggressively, as if the body were still digesting and processing a meal, because metabolically it is. Clinical observations have shown that people with prediabetes and metabolic syndrome frequently report nocturia years before they are diagnosed with blood sugar disorders, making nighttime urination an early warning sign rather than a random inconvenience. The body is attempting to clear excess glucose and rebalance electrolytes, a process that requires moving fluid out through the bladder, essentially turning your sleep into a metabolic cleanup shift. This also explains why a high-carb dinner, even when eaten hours before bed, can trigger awakenings long after digestion seems finished, because insulin's downstream effects on kidney filtration and fluid balance unfold over time, not instantly. Research in endocrinology has repeatedly linked poor glycemic control with increased nighttime urine volume. And when blood sugar improves, many patients experience a dramatic reduction in nocturnal awakenings without any direct treatment of the bladder itself. This is why physicians who prioritize root cause approaches, including Dr. Ken Berry, emphasize that the bladder is often an innocent bystander in a much larger hormonal story, one driven by how modern diets keep insulin elevated far longer than human biology expects. When insulin finally falls, when meals stop spiking glucose late in the day, the kidneys receive a completely different message, one of stability rather than urgency, and urine production naturally declines as the body transitions into repair mode. The astonishing realization is that what feels like a nighttime urinary problem may actually be a metabolic signal echoing hours after your last bite, a signal that your physiology is still working overtime when it should be resting. And by understanding that connection, you begin to see that the path to sleeping through the night may start not in the bathroom but at the dinner table. Most people think hydration is simply about drinking more water, but the human body does not run on water alone. It runs on an electrical system powered by minerals, and when that system is diluted, the consequences show up in places you would never expect, including the number of times you wake up at night to urinate. Every heartbeat, every nerve signal, every cellular exchange depends on electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium, which regulate how fluid moves in and out of your cells. Yet modern advice has convinced millions to drink large quantities of plain water, while simultaneously avoiding the very minerals that allow that water to be properly used. When you flood your system with water that lacks electrolytes, you create a state the kidneys interpret as imbalance, not nourishment, forcing them to excrete the excess fluid in order to maintain the precise sodium concentration your body requires to survive. This is not a gentle adjustment, but a tightly controlled biological defense mechanism, because even a small dilution of blood sodium can disrupt nerve conduction, muscle function, and brain stability, so your kidneys act quickly, increasing urine output to restore equilibrium. Research in renal physiology shows that fluid retention is hormonally linked to sodium balance, meaning that without adequate electrolytes, the body cannot hold on to hydration even if you drink constantly, leading to a cycle of drinking, urinating, and feeling falsely dehydrated. This explains why many people who increase their evening water intake actually worsen nighttime awakenings, because their bodies are not lacking water, they are lacking the mineral signals that tell the kidneys it is safe to conserve that water during sleep. Traditional diets, far removed from processed foods, naturally supplied these electrolytes through whole meats, vegetables, and mineral-rich broths, allowing humans to hydrate efficiently during the day and maintain fluid stability overnight without conscious effort. In contrast, modern ultra-processed diets often contain a paradoxical combination of excessive refined carbohydrates, which disturb insulin and fluid regulation, and insufficient bioavailable minerals, which further impair the body's ability to balance hydration. The result is a physiology that cannot settle, a system constantly trying to correct itself, often waking you in the middle of the night to finish a job that should have been completed hours earlier. Clinicians focused on restoring metabolic context rather than chasing symptoms, including Dr. Ken Berry, frequently emphasized that true hydration comes from the combination of water and nutrients working together, not from water alone, because the kidneys are not measuring how much you drink, they are responding to the chemical composition of your blood. When electrolyte balance is restored earlier in the day through real food and appropriate mineral intake, the body finally receives the signal that resources are sufficient, filtration slows as evening approaches, and the biological switch toward nighttime conservation can engage the way it was designed to. What seems like a simple glass of water is in reality part of a complex conversation between your brain, your kidneys, and your cellular chemistry, and when that conversation includes the minerals it depends on, the need to wake up and correct the imbalance often fades, allowing sleep to return as the uninterrupted, deeply restorative state nature intended. For most of human history, hydration was not something people scheduled, tracked with apps, or forced themselves to do late at night. It happened naturally, and almost entirely during the active hours of daylight, when movement, heat, and food intake created a real biological demand for water. The human body evolved in environments where access to water after sunset was limited, unpredictable, and often unsafe, so our physiology adapted by developing a powerful daytime hydration strategy paired with a nighttime conservation mode designed to protect sleep at all costs. During the day, hormones like aldosterone and natural thirst signals encourage fluid intake and retention, while the kidneys actively filter and regulate volume. But as evening approaches, the circadian system shifts gears, preparing to reduce urine production by increasing antidiuretic hormone and lowering kidney filtration rates. This transition is not subtle. It is one of the clearest examples of how deeply the circadian clock governs organ function, with studies showing measurable declines in renal blood flow and urine formation as the body prepares for sleep. When you front-load your hydration earlier in the day, you are aligning with this ancient rhythm, allowing your kidneys to complete the majority of their filtration work before nightfall, essentially finishing the body's fluid accounting before the repair phase begins. But when modern habits delay hydration into the evening, whether from busy schedules, late workouts, or the mistaken belief that drinking water before bed is universally healthy, the kidneys are forced to remain active during hours they are biologically programmed to rest. Anthropological evidence suggests that our ancestors rarely experienced nocturnal urination because their fluid intake matched energy expenditure and daylight availability, reinforcing a metabolic pattern that modern life has almost completely reversed. Today, artificial lighting extends our days, processed foods alter hormonal signaling, and social routines push eating and drinking later into the evening, creating a mismatch between behavior and biology that the body struggles to reconcile. The kidneys, operating on genetic instructions written long before electricity existed, continue to respond as they always have, attempting to clear excess fluid even if that means waking you from the deepest stages of sleep. Clinicians who emphasize evolutionary and metabolic alignment, including Dr. Ken Berry, often point out that restoring this front-loaded hydration pattern can dramatically reduce nighttime awakenings without medications because it removes the physiological conflict between circadian programming and modern behavior. When the majority of water is consumed earlier, blood volume stabilizes, electrolyte balance is achieved before evening, and the hormonal handoff to nighttime conservation occurs smoothly, allowing the bladder to remain quiet while the brain and body enter their most critical hours of restoration. What feels like a small scheduling change is actually a return to a blueprint encoded into human biology, a reminder that the timing of what we consume can be just as important as the quantity, and when hydration once again follows the rhythm of the sun, sleep often follows with it, deep, uninterrupted, and profoundly healing. There is a moment every evening when your body is supposed to begin shutting down the machinery of metabolism, lowering insulin, calming digestion, and shifting from a state of fuel processing into a state of cellular repair. But when we eat late into the night, especially meals high in refined carbohydrates, we unknowingly force the body to remain metabolically awake long after we have gone to bed. Digestion is not a passive process. It is an energy-intensive event that raises blood sugar, stimulates insulin release, increases circulation to the gut, and signals the kidneys to begin managing the byproducts of nutrient metabolism, including shifts in sodium and fluid balance. Scientific studies in metabolic physiology show that insulin levels can remain elevated for hours after a late meal, particularly in individuals with insulin resistance. And as long as insulin stays high, the body delays the nighttime rise of antidiuretic hormone, the very signal required to reduce urine production during sleep. Instead of entering a restorative fasting state, your body continues sorting, filtering, and redistributing nutrients as if the day never ended, and the kidneys, responding faithfully to those signals, keep producing urine. This is why many people notice that the nights they eat dinner later, snack after dinner, or indulge in sugary desserts are the very nights they wake up repeatedly because the metabolic storm created by that meal has not yet settled. Research on circadian metabolism has demonstrated that eating late shifts the timing of internal clocks not only in the liver and pancreas, but also in the kidneys, effectively rescheduling when those organs think they should be active, creating a biological jet lag without ever leaving home. The bladder becomes the messenger of this misalignment, waking you not because it is overactive, but because your physiology is still processing what you asked it to handle hours earlier. Even more striking, studies have linked late-night eating with poorer glycemic control, higher overnight blood pressure, and reduced fat oxidation, meaning that the habit does more than interrupt sleep, it alters the body's ability to heal, regulate energy, and maintain metabolic health. When meals are moved earlier, allowing 3 to 4 hours between the last bite and sleep, insulin has time to fall, digestion completes, and the hormonal environment shifts toward repair, signaling the kidneys that it is finally safe to slow filtration and conserve fluid. Physicians who focus on correcting these upstream signals, including Dr. Ken Berry, often explain that the goal is not restriction, but timing, because the human body expects a clear boundary between feeding and sleeping, a boundary modern culture has nearly erased. Restoring that boundary allows the nervous system to downshift, the kidneys to reduce output, and the brain to enter deeper stages of sleep uninterrupted, revealing that what seemed like a nighttime bladder issue may actually be the echo of a dinner eaten too close to darkness, a small change in habit capable of transforming not just your nights, but the entire metabolic rhythm that governs your health.